welcome everyone. Um, it's an absolute pleasure to be here to share some thoughts with you today. When uh, when my good friend Hamza Hashmi reached out to me and said that he would like me to come and share my thoughts in this conference, the irony was not lost on me because obviously this is a Management Association Pakistan conference which is filled by wonderful management leaders of Pakistan. And given my background of working in a family business and being a next generation family member, I felt that there was an irony in sharing some thoughts. But I still thought it would be good to come over here and use this opportunity to share some learnings that we've had and what we're up to. So why this particular topic about capital and capability? And it's because these two factors, as we all live and understand and know very well, the confluence of these two factors has a disproportionate impact on all of our economic, political, societal lives. And the reason why I say that is because even in normal economic theory, you're talking about labor and talent productivity on one side and capital productivity on the other. And just to be clear about the definitions, we've got capital, which is composed of natural capital, intellectual capital, financial capital, whereas capability is segmented broadly into blue-collar job workers, which produce products in the front line, as well as white-collar job workers who actually develop the organization and supply chains in order to provide those products and services efficiently to the marketplace. So the confluence of these two obviously because of the importance, have various threads that come out, both in terms of economic, political, societal, technological, philosophical, religious debates that happen on how these two sets of society have to come together. And we've seen the world, the capitalist system approach a particular set of market-based opportunity sets, and more the political system is taking a much more of a democratic setup. And that the confluence of these two, where capital is usually concentrated in a few hands and capability is a lot more broad-based, how they work together to create shared value, and then how do they share in that value, become very important topics that require further understanding. So at the core of this relationship, I believe, is one particular aspect, which is the principal-agent relationship, where the agent is a party that provides capabilities or services on behalf of the principal, who is the ultimate stakeholder. And that relationship is fundamentally based on trust. So why I think that's important is because while the relationship can be very, very value accretive, there are some perverse incentives that can come about, which is very well documented in what's traditionally known as a principal-agent problem, which is at the heart of the conversation I would like to have with you today. So looking at a company, you've got the blue-collar job workers who are the agents of the white-collar job workers, because they're the ones who are producing the products and services, whereas the white-collar job workers are the agents of the board, who are ultimately agents of the shareholder. So how these four organs, even within a company, organize themselves and understand their respective roles and responsibilities, where their interests align and where their interests diverge, becomes absolutely central to institutionalization of trust and the scaling of trust. And the reason why I say that is because it is empirically shown that societies or organizations where the cost of trust is lower, i.e. transaction costs are lower, they lead to far more productive outcomes and a freer exchange of people, ideas, and capital. So at the end, I think while companies have been focusing a lot more on generating returns to capital, there are also other elements, new conversations which are happening, where the definition of who is the principal of the company has also changed and evolved. And we just heard Dr. Shamshad Akhtar speak about sustainability. There's more of a conversation about how society and the environment overall is also a critical principle of companies, which is changing the definition of shareholder value to stakeholder value. I think that's a very, very interesting aspect of development which is taking place. So, coming back to trust, what does it mean to have trust? I don't mean trust just being good human beings and what. There has to be a system that perpetuates trust. And any system that perpetuates trust is the one that's fundamentally based on four underlying factors, which is having credible institutions, having good governance, reporting, and accountability, aligned incentive between principals and agents, and well-educated, healthy, and educated workforce. The combination of these four aspects are absolutely central to having a system of trust that actually expands. And what we see in the case of Pakistan is that we have challenges in these four areas that increase the amount of transaction costs happen in the economy. And I'll give you a couple of examples over here. So if you read this book, *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari, he said something which is absolutely wonderful, that the single biggest reason why our species was able to dominate the natural world was because human beings figured out how to trust at scale, at low cost, through what he calls imagined realities, whether they're laws, whether in his mind religions, whether they are the monetary system. All of these are imagined realities that perpetuate and reduce the transaction cost of having trust at scale very, very rapidly. So coming to Pakistan, as I mentioned, there are some challenges that we find, and I want to just pick one example to highlight what the challenge is and what to do about it. So if you look at Pakistan, we are obviously a very capital scarce country, and if you don't have, if you have lower amount of trust and higher transaction costs, capital then gets deployed poorly, and especially when it's so scarce, that leads to some very high impact economic and social outcomes. So I'll share one example with you, which just to highlight the issue at hand. We have a government policy right now on taxation, which is heavily driven by revenue collection as opposed to productivity growth. And then the taxation system has come about where the informal sector has a much greater tax advantage than the formal sector. So the formal sector not only has to pay tax, which increases the cost, but because it's operating in a market where other people are not being tax compliant, ethical businesses' ability to have a larger target segment gets eroded rapidly. And we see companies in the food sector, in the logistics sector, in the retail sector. These are multi-billion-dollar industries in Pakistan, but we don't find large companies in these areas. And one of the reasons is that industries which have lower margins and higher capital velocity, there the tax, the incentive to tax evade is very, very high, and hence ethical businesses cannot grow. Secondly, what happens is that the money that is generated from those businesses then, because it's undocumented, goes into the undocumented sector, most notably real estate. And there, when money goes into unproductive land assets, it pushes up urban prices, it makes property a lot less affordable, increases the cost of capability providers, and especially when it's tax-free, really does impact the competing opportunities for capital, and hence the default is whatever the surpluses are, they get funded into property markets, which are far deeper than any of the other financial markets for capital in the country. The third element that comes into it is that if you have a business which is running a double book, it becomes very difficult to actually have professionalized management and have good corporate governance. And then what that does is it just completely cuts you out from the formal financial system, and hence, so not only do you lose on the market, not only do you lose on not professionalizing and scaling up your operations, but also the access to finance is limited. And it's a problem because I know a lot of ethical, companies run by great entrepreneurs who are deeply mired in this issue where they say, well, I have 70% of my sales coming from non-tax sectors. How do I change this? What do I do about this? And clearly that's a challenge which has not been solved yet, which is why it's super important for the government to really look at its taxation policy to really make productivity and focus on productivity, have a justified and fair taxation system that perpetuates and rewards good behavior so that we can scale up companies and those companies can invest in technology and productivity and get access to formal capital and then achieve scale. And I think this is one of the biggest reasons why when you have to have companies which are operating in these environments, then those companies tend to become owner managed, because you need to have your family members sitting on top, making sure everything in the books is okay, because of the lack of transparency in the way we operate. So this obviously results in lower tax collection, and then the government's response traditionally has been to further tax the formal sector or rely on indirect taxation, further widening the competitive gap between the formal and the informal sector. So I think that this system that perpetuates lack of trust and transparency makes it really hard to be profitably ethical in Pakistan. I think that's something that we, as a society and as leaders in society, must really focus on. So this is something which is very important, but this is something very close to my heart, because dealing with this principal agent problem and how to build that partnership between capability and capital is something that was central to my role as the vice chairman of Engro Corp, which the responsibility I held till the October of 2021 for 3 years. And as you know, Engro is a company which already has a very well-established platform for institutionalization and transparency. Alhamdulillah, we're blessed with having some fantastic leaders and great blue-collar workers who give their blood, sweat, and tears into the company. But still, even with that sort of an environment, it is really hard to focus on this principal agent problem and how to ensure that the board does its job in solving for this for our stakeholders. So how do we do this? We look at 4 particular areas. One is capital. How do we guide capital to the opportunities where it creates the most amount of value? And that's so the company can solve some meaningful problems. Our fundamental belief is a company is nothing but society organizing itself to solve a particular problem. And the better it knows the problem and the better the solution, the more value it creates. So one particular example of that is our recent foray into telecom infrastructure. And the reason why we did that was because I think COVID was a stark reminder about the difference between the have and have-nots. Those who are caught on the wrong side of the digital divide, they lost out on 2 years of schooling, they lost out on access to markets, they lost out to healthcare. So making sure that people get connected is the simplest, shortest path to provide people the opportunity to learn, to transact, and to build wealth. The second thing we focus quite extensively on is policy. Going back to my earlier point, government policy, I think there's an opportunity to bring that more in line with productivity and creating an even playing field. And that's something we work very closely with the government on. And one of the examples that you may have seen in the press is that Engro Fertilizer is championing the cause for market reforms in the fertilizer sector. So we champion the notion that we should get market price of gas, and we should be able to sell at market price of urea as well. Because not doing so, having urea subsidized, leads to an over-application of urea, especially at the expense of other fertilizer products, which leads to lower agricultural productivity, it leads to wastage products, it leads to lower tax revenue, and again, erodes the foundation of that partnership between capability and capital. The third area we focus on is people. And the question we ask is, how do we invest in our organizational capabilities by investing in our people, investing in technology, and entering into complementary partnerships? And over there, we've entered into a few partnerships with capability providers and joint venture partners. So we've established an Engro Leadership Academy at KSBL in conjunction with McKinsey, which deals with dealing with change, and both on an individual and collective basis, as well as going into equity partnership, most notably in our food business, by partnering with a global company like Fields and Campina to get access to talent, technologies, and know-how. The fourth area we look at is governance. And again, as we mentioned, governance is very important to bring about the necessary transparency and improve the trust within the system. And that is based on our focus on having the right kind of performance management, the right kind of compensation system, so that we can sustainably create value and share that value based on shared values. So the example that we have on that is that when we came in and I was given the opportunity to run the board, the board design we have is that the majority of our board is independent. And a third of it comprises of female directors. They happen to be females, but they're the most competent directors that we could that are required for the organization. And while as vice chairman, it made my job infinitely harder to work with a very empowered, very vocal, very articulate board. The benefit of the feedback you get by making better decisions is absolutely tremendous. And it reminds me of this saying that governance is like having brakes on a car. It looks like it's slowing down, but cars have brakes so they can go faster and safer. And that's how we view our governance within the company. So why do we need to change? The reason why we need to change and keep on investing in this is because, as the CEO of Bain said at World Economic Forum, that the confluence of technology and the confluence of environmental awareness, the combination of these two will lead to dramatically different winners and losers in the coming years. So if companies are not using this as an opportunity to become one of those winners, it can find itself very easy as one of the losers and become irrelevant. And we already see that happening. So I'll just touch upon one aspect which you'll hear a lot more as the day progresses, which is on what's happening in the startup ecosystem, where you have a confluence of transportation as a service, payment system, online marketplaces, now digital banking, and this is going to fundamentally reshape the way we see the supply chains will organize themselves, and already we're feeling the impact, right? Because the demands of our leadership is increasing. How do we decide on go-to-market, traditional versus entrepreneurial? What do we do about that? But secondly, we're already seeing that even for us as a company like Engro, that we are seeing that the best people are wanting to go and work for the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So how companies respond to that? By having a deeper engagement with employees, by having better performance systems and compensation systems, and then creating an ecosystem approach so we can solve problems together becomes really, really important. So I know I've touched upon a whole bunch of things and my time is up, but I'm happy to sit down and have further conversations with you. My intent was to share some things that we're doing and why what we're doing, and then look forward to having more engaged conversations. And I thank you for the opportunity to addressing you today. Thank you.